We're back with more Talking Law TV, and we're here with our guest, Gene Brooks. Hi, Gene.
Hey, Michael.
And you're going to tell us about psychological injuries.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the injuries to the mind.
The mind.
As opposed to the body.
So the last time you were on the show, it was the brain.
That's right.
And now it's the mind.
Uh-huh.
And you can't locate that one for us.
No. Everybody's got one, though, hopefully.
Yeah, I know, because some people change them all the time.
That's right.
Are these real injuries? I mean, you know, people have made fun of these kind of things for forever.
I know, and there's sort of a prejudice against psychological injury, but psychological injuries are very real, and you can see them in even on TV. I guess the most recent example would be like the earthquake down in Haiti. You can see pictures of the children in some cases sort of just staring off into no man's land because they've been traumatized, and they're physically fine, but yet they've had an injury to their mind.
So if they do a CAT scan, a PET scan, X-rays, and so forth, you're not going to see that.
No, you're not going to see any.
So like in our example picture here, this doctor's looking, and she's not going to see depression.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So you know it's real. God knows they make enough drugs for it.
Yeah.
Can these be caused by brain injuries?
They can be, and that is so the diagnostic challenge for a lot of the doctors and the psychologists and the neuropsychologists is determining whether there's been organic brain damage, which means injury to the structure of the brain, which can also cause a depression, for instance, or whether it's the depression is a response of some other factor in the life. I mean, for instance, somebody who's having chronic pain, you can't see the pain, you can't take a picture of the pain. The chronic pain may be very disabling. There may be an objective reason for the pain that they can see on the x-rays, you know, such as a broken bone, for instance, but let's take something that's more chronic than that, maybe a back. Sometimes they can image that the reason for the pain, and sometimes they can't. But the depression resulting from that pain, of course, can be very real, particularly if there's been a loss of quality of life, which is all like mental loss.
Things like neuropathy. I mean, where you just have this tingling all the time, but there's nothing you can see anywhere.
Yeah, but and that would be more organic. If you have the paresthesias, they might be able to diagnose that with EKGs, or where they can measure the nerve impulses going down the hands or the feet. And maybe they can, maybe they can't. In some cases, with a toxic injury, for instance, sometimes those type of peripheral neuropathies, which are very often related to toxic injury, can't be measured.
Okay.
And so it's you just relying on the symptomology.
Then there's the kid with the model car glue. They say kills brain cells.
That's right, it does. And then, there you can I've seen CT scans where you can see organic brain injury, presumably from early drug use, because sometimes you see this in some younger people, 20s and 30s, who, well, they really shouldn't be there, and sometimes that explains a lot about the situation.
How can you determine if somebody suffered a psychological injury?
Primarily behavior. If you know the person and their behavior has changed, whether they've become depressed, whether they become very anxious, maybe develop some type of a phobia after a certain incident, those are the primary indications. Is you would notice how the person has changed. And we were speaking with someone whose wife had been in a car accident the other day, and it was a fairly significant accident involving a tractor trailer, and she had she was very scared anytime she got in the car now, and she was getting to the point that she didn't want to get in the car. Well, can be significant, and that needs to be treated because she has an anxiety syndrome. She's developing a phobia about getting in cars, and that can grow. It can grow to the point that she won't leave the house. Mm-hmm. So there are techniques to treat that, and they treat them with biofeedback, where they try to decrease the anxiety when they're exposing the person to the particular form, whether it's a car, whatever, that's causing them that anxiety, so person can start dealing with it.
Okay. Now, as someone who practices tort law, when you have to go to court on something like this, is it harder to prove?
Yeah, it's much harder to prove because of what you brought up initially. You know, are these real injuries? It's not like a broken arm. It's not like, you know, a lung that's diseased. It's not something you can take a picture of and saying this part of the body is injured. It's a psychological injury, and there may not be any sign of what happens. And the law also does not allow recovery for a lot of psychological injuries. So, for instance, and it's been the law in Georgia, if I saw my child die in front of my eyes because of somebody else did, I wouldn't be able to recover from my psychological injuries. So there's, you know, unless there had been an impact, if there had been this impact rule in Georgia. But that could have suffered a very serious injury. So sometimes you can't even get to court. But if you can get to court, it's difficult to prove, and you have to call people who knew this person before, a person who know the person now, and your expert witness would be a psychologist to explain how this can happen and what the implications are. And there are tests that can be given to a person too, that test for depression, and there are biofeedback tests that can be given too to show whether a person is reacting with anxiety to a certain situation.
Okay. And then more famous examples, of course, are from military, people who were in Desert Storm, the Gulf War, and then the following activities.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome.
And we have an example picture here of someone who was probably in the deserts of Kuwait with the lighting that's here.
Yeah.
They have PTSD.
Right. And that really has become well known as a result of wars, because people are thrust into unfamiliar situations and go through horrendous experiences, and that causes a lot of stress, as you can imagine, a lot of anxieties, and that can become pathological, such that what we call the subconscious is repeating that in dreams. I mean, the brain's always working and our emotions are always there.
Yeah, after the first two world wars, they called it something else, I forgot what, when the guy was having like flashbacks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of cases it was dismissed as, oh, well,
shell shock.
Yeah, shock, or, you just get over it.
Yeah, but it's not, easy to do. If you were in, Iraq or Iran at, in 1990, you saw a lot of really bad stuff.
And now, like the VA, I know, and VA's published some really good stuff, is treating it. And also, I brought this book. I can show it to the viewers here. This is the DSM-4, and this book is sort of the Bible of psychological injury. It defines various types of psychological injury, whether they're anxiety-based, such as post-traumatic stress syndrome or phobias, whether they're a depression-type syndromes that can become pathologic after a certain point, whether is a conversion disorder too, where people they can be blind even though there's nothing wrong with their eyes, for instance, when they become catatonic. So this is primarily what the psychologists use to define various injuries.
Right. How can you as an attorney help someone in this situation?
Well, first you recommend that they go see a psychologist or counseling, and they go at least try to get a diagnosis so you can get a handle on what's going on. And that can be problematic because some people don't have access to that type of care. And it's frustrating because you can just watch it get worse sometimes. But the best thing as lawyers, if they can't be treated, is document everything and at least get it diagnosed, and that is a recoverable damage because it is a compensable loss that the person has had, and so you prove it the best you can.
Okay, thank you so much, Gene. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay tuned.